You've heard me talk about BU Brand Live, an event by my friend and colleague Ati in Las Vegas. Probably half the guests on the show over the past year are women I met at the event last year, and I talk to friends I made there almost daily. These women have not only become friends, but continue to shape my business, my confidence, and my worldview. If you are a female coach, business owner, founder, or personal brand, and you're ready to strengthen your network with aligned, high level women, you need to be there in September. This year, the event is September 25th, 26th, and 27th in Las Vegas, and I'll be there speaking and enthusiastically sponsoring. There are less than 30 tickets left, and the event is going to sell out. But if you sign up using my link in the show notes and the code SARAH, that's SARAH, you'll get 10% off your ticket. Believe me, you don't want to miss it. Come hang out with me in Las Vegas at BU Brand Live. Welcome to Big Brave Business. This is the podcast where we answer big questions reshaping entrepreneurship. I'm Sarah K. Heeter, and this is Season 3. Each week, I'm bringing on my friends, mentors, and some of the best thought leaders I know. We dive into bold, values-driven conversations about leadership, equity, ethics, and building businesses that actually make a difference. Ready to do business better? Let's dive in. Welcome back to Big Brave Business. Today, we are talking about, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, first of all, thank you. But second of all, this is a topic that just can't be avoided in my life, in my world, and certainly on this podcast, which is the patriarchy. Today, we're going to be talking about the patriarchy and entrepreneurship. But before we dig into the big question, let me give you a quick introduction to the folks who you're going to be hearing from, the voices that are going to be on this podcast. So going first, if you're new here, my name is Sarah Heeter. I am the host of Big Brave Business. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Podfox Media, which is a podcast production and strategic consultation company.
My name is Susanna Baker. I am a marketer and the founder of Untangling Ideas, which is a boutique marketing agency that focuses on accessibility and branding and messaging.
Hi, I'm Siobhan Strode. I'm an advocacy consultant and mentor for changemakers, raising 3 feminist boys.
Hi, I'm Shelby Watson-Hampton, and I'm a farmer and an author and marketing in the agricultural space. And I help women, rural entrepreneurs, farmers, ranchers, and small businesses thrive.
I love this. What? Like diverse cross-section of fields. So that is going to be interesting. And of course, like breadth of location as well, locale. So I think that'll be fun too. So today's big question is, how does patriarchy impact entrepreneurship? And what needs to change for true gender equity in business?
I'm going to kick us off by thinking about how we show up in our businesses. I think patriarchy traditionally wants women to be small, to not tell their stories, to keep quiet, get on with it, keep your head down. And I think that's a huge thing. If you're an entrepreneur or a founder, whatever you want to call yourself, you need to be able to talk about your origin story. You need to be able to show up. And it's kind of taboo in a way, whatever your kind of origin story is, whatever your stories are and how you set up your business or whatever drove you to begin or all that kind of thing. Like it's, you kind of have been told your entire life not to talk about these things. Like, you're not special, pipe down. Like that for me, and the work that I do is huge because women don't want to show up as their whole selves. They hide certain parts of themselves. So I think that's, for me, underpinning quite a lot of our behaviors as women in business, small businesses. Yeah. So
I'd like to add to that. Yes. I'm glad that you started there because when I started my business and have been helping primarily small business owners, primarily women, market themselves, I didn't realize that I would have to become like a borderline therapist because the amount of times that we're like, okay, actually we have to take multiple steps back because what do you mean that you have been a graphic designer for Marvel and The Atlantic and Vanity Fair, but you're not comfortable putting on there because XYZ? An easy example. And they're like, well, because it feels like bragging. And it's this sense where over time, I've had to talk people through the problem for women of being overly humble in business, because we've been taught that there's a false correlation between humility and like respect, and that you have to be humble, you have to not take up too much space in order to be respected, in order to be professional. But it's a very dangerous intersection that I found between perfectionism and people pleasing and humility and overthinking. And people will use lots of different versions of those words, but it all comes into the same space of like, am I doing this right? What are people thinking about me? And it's just so problematic because the people that are expected to take up the least amount of space are the ones that are the most marginalized.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that because we see that in our industry. So I'm in the agricultural industry. So I think women farmers, women ranchers, women small business, who are entrepreneurs. And it is massively still mostly men and mostly older white men, to be explicit. Women and these are gaining ground, but it's slow but steady. We actually, the last survey that the Census Bureau did, it showed that 36% of all farmers in the US are women. So we're getting there, but it is still an uphill battle. And a lot of what Susanna just said really comes down to like imposter syndrome. It's like having the qualifications and knowing you can do it, but constantly having to prove yourself to the people around you. And as you constantly have to prove yourself to the people around you, it erodes from your thoughts. And we especially see that because a lot of the businesses that we deal with are in family business, right? So they're not just going up against some sort of patriarchal structure. It's their father or their grandfather or their uncles or brothers and or their husband. So I farm on our family farm with my aunt and uncle, and myself and my husband are all together in kind of a four set. That brings its own intricacies to a business as when you're doing family. Yeah, in this industry, we see a lot of that. And I am heartened by the fact that women are creating space. So there's a lot of groups out there like that cater to rural women to kind of help bring them along. But when I find stuff like this, especially in other industries, I always like to broaden the scope and see how it's affecting other folks in other industries across the globe.
You start to feel like a broken record in telling people like, it really is okay to talk about, like Siobhan said, like how you got here. And it's just so interesting that what I hear, no matter what someone's story is, I feel like, oh, but it feels sleazy talking about myself, or it feels like icky or salesy, when in reality, you're just sharing basic information about yourself, because people can't make an informed decision about whether they should hire you if they don't have the details, if they don't understand what your credentials are, why you're even qualified to do this thing. Then like, how could they possibly decide to work with you? And so they're just doing themselves a disservice by hiding this information.
Yes, I would take it a step further and say that part of the fear that I've come up against, sometimes myself, but also with clients, what I see is that I think there's also this very large fear that we can't deliver if we overpromise. And so I think there's like a being really hard and self-critical on ourselves of, if I make promises like this, if I set an expectation like this, what if I disappoint people? Or what if I let them down? Or what if I make them angry or upset with me? Or like, and this isn't completely unjustified because people are more critical of marginalized groups than they are of cis hetero white men, right? So a cis hetero white man can be mediocre and get accolades, but a woman has to be better. And a non-binary person who's outwardly visibly non-binary or non-gender conforming has to be better. A Black person or a person of color has to be better. A disabled person that you can physically see their disability has to be better, because people are looking for, consumers are looking for a way that person lets them down. And I think we have that expectation internally that like, people are going to be critical of me. So if I say, using your same example, so sorry to your client who is now like the example of this episode, but using your client as the example who didn't want to put like Marvel, etc. on their resume, if they set that expectation and then somebody's unhappy with their work, does that feel like a false promise? And I see this all the time with podcasting, where women come to me and they're like terrified, either of being a guest or especially to start their own podcast, like terrified, because there's a vulnerability of people are going to see me, not necessarily like visibly, because podcasting can definitely be audio only, but people are going to see the real me. The longer I do this, the less it's like performing on stage for a 10-minute talk or whatever, or even a 45-minute talk. Like, I don't just have to be on for 45 minutes. If I'm recurring podcasting every single week, then over time, they're going to see the real me. And that's really scary and really vulnerable. And like, I don't think men are generally scared of that. Some men, sure. But like, generally speaking, I don't think men are scared of being seen. They just like fucking march into battle and they're like, we're ready. And women are like, someone's going to see the real me. And then they're going to know what an imposter I am. They're going to know all the ways I suck, because that's what I tell myself all the time, because that's what society tells us. So they can sell us the solution to all the reasons we feel like shit about ourselves.
It's like, if there's one more broadcast, like they just grab a microphone and go. They don't half the time, they don't even know what they're talking about. And like all of us women are like, I'm going to reread my notes. I'm going to make sure my bio is perfect. I'm going to get in here and make sure that I actually belong in the room. Yeah. It's like, how hard can it be? Boys do it.
Bros with mics. There's so many of them. They don't give a fuck, do they? They literally just don't give a fuck. They just turn up and they spout utter shit. No facts. The statistics you reeled off about farming, and they literally make stuff up. Whereas yours is like based in actual fact. They can't help themselves. They're just like, oh, did you know 50% of women think this? And you're like, do they? Where did you
like
no women I know think that?
50% of women to talk to you, man.
Yeah,
Like,
the 2 women who will hang out with them. Like, that's it.
Which is why it's so frustrating, because you're like, okay, well then how do we fix this? Like, we could be more like them. Like, we could also not care at all what we're talking about, but also then we wouldn't be us. Like, I am utterly incapable of under-delivering, coming unprepared. Like, excellence is a non-negotiable. And so it's really hard to, I guess, quote unquote, compete, because like I'm not willing to drop to that level. So it's not like, well, we should just be more like them. It's like, how can we own our power and still be us in the same way? It actually reminds me, because my background is, I did almost a decade in corporate before I launched my own thing. And I distinctly remember the difference in male and female leadership, especially in corporate, where they like keep trying to push women into more male leadership styles, and it just doesn't work. And instead of trying to become them, it's like, okay, well, how can a woman who has a very high emotional intelligence lead with empathy and still be a strong and respected leader without having to try to be a female version of that male CEO? It just doesn't work.
and you know what's funny, looking at the 4 of us here and listening to us talk, it's like, raise your hand if you're a perfectionist with a touch of ADHD and a type A with multiple planners, possibly an eldest daughter. Like,
I was about to say, what about eldest daughters? Oh, and I'm also a daughter of immigrants. So like, you just add on those layers.
yeah, all the things, like you said, you're actually physically incapable of under delivering. And I'm like, oh my God, this is our arena here.
Yeah. But men, there's like loads of statistics about men who apply for jobs that they like qualify for like 2% on a job description, whereas women are like, oh my God, I only meet like 99.8% of the criteria for this job, I probably shouldn't apply. Whereas men are like, hey, I can read, I'll apply for that job. Like,
yeah, and
woo!
Look at all this opportunity for me to grow. Like, and not that I necessarily think all men are like thinking it through in that way, but I think that there is an underlying assumption as a man that they would go for roles they can grow into. Women apply to roles that they know they can show up with excellence. Like, excellence is non-negotiable. So if there's a lot I don't know, if there's 20% of this job that I don't know, which is not even a lot, by the way, but if there's 20% of this job that I don't know, then I can't guarantee I can show up with excellence, because there's a learning curve. But a learning curve should be expected. And the thing is, this is, again, I'm going to say it's cyclical, because if we, and to your point, Susanna, if we did emulate men, and we only went for positions and opportunities that we know we can crush it. We're going to be bored. We're going to be underutilized. We're going to be running circles, but we're also setting the expectation that we can over deliver. So then the expectation is that you work 60, 70 hours. The expectation is that you also pick up coffee. You also order lunch. You also clean out the fridge in the office. You also are going to make copies. You're also going to take on more and more and more, because I've set the expectation that I can so over deliver. And do the birthday gifts. Yeah. Siobhan put that in the chat. Yeah. Plan the Christmas party, whatever it is, right? The holiday party. So I think that these like extra tasks get piled onto women because women demonstrate over and over, we're going to show up with excellence and we're going to over deliver. You don't give that to the guy that's like passing by the skin of his teeth. You give it to the woman who's super organized and together and is nailing everything, right? So we perpetuate this by over delivering. But if we do the opposite, because there's this social standard and we emulate what men do, then we show up in positions that we actually have room to grow in. But the expectation is you're going to show up as super organized. What's wrong with you? Like, I'm going to take your woman card. Like, you're not like, I'm used to women who like can over deliver and like serve to please me, right? Like, what's going on here? So the expectation that we're going to have a growth curve is also different. And I just think it's just exhausting. So I think, Susanna, in answer to your question of like, what can we do? I think what I'm trying to do, and I think what so much of Big Brave Business is about, and like having community with other people who want to do this, is like, and I said this in an episode last week as well, but I think instead of we change to fit patriarchal white supremacist corporate capitalism, we change white supremacist patriarchal corporate capitalism to match us, and or to look different, to include us, right? To include everyone, not just us on the call, because this is a kind of homogenous call to a certain degree. But I think that we change the norm, not change ourselves to fit the existing norm, if that makes sense. We can do business better.
You have to infiltrate it from the inside. You have to be part of it you have to be part of the change you want to see. And that is exhausting too. And it's sometimes like, do we even want to do it? Do we want to fit into that world, or do we just want to create an entirely different one? Like, I look at Susanna and I'm like, congratulations on escaping corporate. Like, big high five. I still have another day job that is corporate-ish that I do as well as my side hustle. So I have not escaped that yet. But yeah, I mean, we are trying to change my particular industry from the inside, and that is really the only way it's going to happen. And wouldn't it be nice if it was quicker?
Thank you. I appreciate that. I like to tell people that I jumped off the corporate ladder without breaking any bones. Thank goodness. But I did, like, before we shift a little bit, I wanted to fill you guys in on a dirty little secret that I heard right before I left. It was like a talk from someone that worked in HR. And I don't think anyone approved the talk, because I think that they said they said the quiet part out loud, so to speak. I was like, I can't believe that you admitted that. And they gave us the data points on women who were like put forward for potential promotions versus men, and how those decisions are made and what percentage of them aren't. And they were talking about how like 90% of the time women are put as like not yet ready. Like, we want to promote her, but she's not yet ready. Whereas like a lot more of the time men are like, yeah, he could probably do it. And they ended that talk saying like, well, men are promoted on potential, whereas women are promoted on performance. And they said this
want to bang my head against it.
Right.
100%.
They said this to a group of all women.
My God.
And then like over the next year or so, almost every single woman in that room quit. And I was like, well, you showed us what the future looks like from the inside, right? So a lot of those women, including me, decided to build our own thing. And we are now running businesses in a way that, Sarah, to your point, are changing the rules. There are a lot of things that I do in my business that are the complete opposite of what I had been taught or what I learned, because I have the luxury of choosing. It's like, well, I'm in charge, so I don't have to run my business the way that society normally does, that capitalism likes it to be, that business coaches are trying to convince people to do, because that just doesn't sit right with me.
you get to do it holistically, like for you, like what works sustainably and organically. Oh, I want to be in that place. I'm really trying hard to get there. A few
For me
articles.
and also for my clients, and
Right.
like
Yes.
block out the noise, because there's another part of patriarchy and entrepreneurship that we haven't even gotten to yet, but it's this like the girl boss reaction to the patriarchy, where you have these women saying like women need to be rich, and so you can just like hire people overseas and pay them pennies, which to me is just trickle down economics but in pink. Like we know that that doesn't work. So why are we doing the exact same thing that we know is problematic to women, but just now we're the ones
Now we're just
doing it to
branding
other
it
people?
as empowerment. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
No. That's still patriarchy.
And sometimes it's hard to see the difference. So like there's things that are clear, right? Like the concept of the 4-hour work week, that's how men do it, right? We don't I agree with you. I don't want to do that. I want to pay people a livable wage. Now, of course, a livable wage looks different depending on where you live in the world, but it is messed up to build a bit. By the way, it is messed up to build a business where you're charging customers first world rates and then offloading all of the work of running the business and delivering on the client deliverables to people who live in third world countries and paying them pennies on the dollar, and you just keep the difference. And your quote unquote 4-hour work week is connecting the two. Nope. In that case, the people who are doing all the work should just be charging the rate and keeping the money. Why do they have to go through you? Like, that's ridiculous. So, yes, we can acknowledge like that's a messed up business plan. And at the same time, when there's somebody who builds a platform, who talks about anti-racism, who talks about the ways the patriarchy shows up, and then also talks about, I want women to be rich, I want women to make more money, then it starts to get fuzzy because there's things that they say that you're like, yes, I know I agree with these ethics. And there's things that I'm like, this sounds like it's related to the things people who I know are problematic say, but then I can't quite tell where's the line. And you then like kind of lose trust in yourself of like, do I trust this person? Do I not? Like, it's not just like black and white, good versus bad. It's like we're all infiltrated by patriarchy and capitalism and white supremacy and like trying to tell the difference of like, where's the problem? I don't know. Have you guys watched How I Met Your Mother? It's like a callback because it
Oh yeah.
was so
Yeah.
popular, and of course now it's not. Okay, so it makes me think of, if in case the person listening has not seen it, so one of the characters is like a kindergarten teacher, and she says when somebody's acting like things are in kindergarten, somebody's acting like things are really good, then the question is like, where's the poop? And so she is saying to another adult friend, she's like, where's the poop, Robin? Where's the poop? So I think that when you're like, when things look really good, but you're like, hang on, where's the poop? That's what always pops into my head, is just like Lily's voice saying, where's the poop, Robin? Like trying to find it.
And there
It's
is some in every industry and every business. Like it's not that perfectly curated aesthetic you're going to see on the Instagram feeds and the TikTok feeds. And all we see authenticity really speaking more now to audiences. People don't want the fully filtered, perfect viewpoint. They want to connect with you as an authentic person. And I think in small business, that's super important. It is hard to do though, because to put yourself out there authentically is to be like vulnerable and to put out your flaws and things that you haven't quite figured out, or you're working through a process, and opening yourself up to those comments. I struggle with that perfectionism issue. I think like probably a lot of us do, like we talked about. So it's hard to like, I want to be good enough to be on screen, but not so too perfectly curated that doesn't feel authentic, but like safely authentic. I don't know. It's a hard line. It's a hard.
Yeah, I went to this rage circle thing last night, and we were talking about rage and anger and how it's not a very feminine trait. And I kind of fully own the fact that I'm quite an aggressive person. Like I'm really loving, really nurturing, really generous, unless you cross me or somebody I love, or there's something not right. Like, where's the poop? And I like completely own the aggression. Like I played rugby at uni to kind of keep the aggression down. I'm not like Elena Mayer, don't get me wrong, like, oh, swoon. But yeah, like I would put myself in between things. So like I see like a bloke at this train station having a go at his girlfriend or whatever. Because I'm big, I think that'd be a great episode title. But yeah, I put myself in between them. I'd be like, pick on someone your own size. Like I'm 5'9". I'm a little bit physically threatening to some smaller men who maybe have like issues. I don't know. I find myself being quite aggressive. And that's a really unlikable, unpalatable thing, because men don't like women who stand up for other women or themselves. And they don't like women who speak up. They don't like women who aren't afraid of them. And I kind of was in this rage circle being like, am I the only one who doesn't mind being angry? Like, and I think it's really interesting that I had quite a like traumatic childhood with a lot of domestic violence and stuff. And I fucking hate apathy. That is one of the things that like triggers my rage. And for the last decade, have been heavily involved in politics and stood for parliament and blah, blah, blah. Sarah's heard this all before in the previous podcast. But like, there's a lot of misogyny and there's a lot of kind of, you have to kind of put up with a lot of shit. And I think I bring a lot of that into my business in like, I don't care how I turn up. I don't wear makeup. I don't do my hair. Like I dress like a toddler. Like I don't care how I look. I don't care about how people are going to speak to me, because I've had the worst of it. I've had death threats. Like I don't care. And I think a lot of that's because I'm in a very secure relationship with my husband. We've been together for like 25 years. So, and I'm only 40, just to caveat that before I'm like, oh my God, is she like 65? No, I'm not. But yeah, I don't know. There's so much stuff, but patriarchy is just it makes everything really difficult for women. Unless you have role models that's part of the reason I do what I do and why I speak up so often, is because if people see someone normal, not normal, completely neurospicy, aggressive, mental, whatever you want to call me. But like if people see someone like who's got 3 kids, I'm like a mum doing these things, standing up, talking about social justice issues, not giving a shit about presentation, or like, I think people then go like, oh, maybe I can do that too. So I think there's a lot of things about role modeling. I think that's a huge part. And I think growing up, there were so few stories of women speaking up and doing things and that other people weren't doing, or like there were so many stories erased from history, weren't there? Like that we didn't hear about until now. There's a whole series of podcasts on like hidden women, and there's films coming out about NASA women, and I don't know, I just think it's a really fascinating thing. Going back to like how we show up in our businesses, I think role modeling is part of how we change that. Like if you're not, like I think Susanna, maybe you're somebody, and Shelby and Sarah, you're all role models. We're all leaders doing things in our communities and in our industries. And we kind of, not paving the way, that like wanky phrase, but like we kind of are, because the people that we work with see us doing big, scary things, big, brave business things. And they're like, oh, but they're like normal people. They're not these like multi-millionaire wankers. I don't know.
I wish
like,
I was a multi-millionaire, but I manifest it.
Is that so you can do trickle-down economics, Shelby?
That is so, I can, yes, contribute to the economy with all women, smaller businesses. But you mentioned the rage. And I'm not going to get into politics here, but I live in the US. And so there's a lot happening. And I walk around with a hot belly full of rage that I feel like I could just blow out like a dragon. And you have to carry this anger with you while you're working, while you're parenting, while you're being a wife, and you're running a business, and you're at the grocery store, and you're trying not to spill it out. You're trying to keep it contained in a way that's safe for yourself, physically or mentally or emotionally, or, you know, what's appropriate. And yet you're so, where are we in this world? And it's not just in the States, across the globe. Women have been fighting for millennia, since basically the entirety of the human genome walked out of a cave at some point. Women have been treated second class, and we fight for voting, and we fight for rights, and we fight for the right to own property, and to have custody of our kids, and to run businesses, and we're still here. We haven't broken what they call in the agricultural industry the brass ceiling. You see what I did there? We make strides, but it's like 4 steps forward, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps. It's like, I have a lot of rage. I am in therapy, I will say that. But I think a rage circle sounds like a lot of fun. Also, there's rage rooms where you just break shit. Kind of interested how to do that. It's on what to do with.
I loved the concept of a rage circle too. And I actually wrote it down because so I have a bunch of these sessions scheduled for season 3. We started recording in February. So February, March, April, and May. That will take me through the recordings into November, which is fantastic. But then I'm going to take a break for the summer. And we're going to come back and do like the second half of season 3 recordings after the summer. And I've been keeping notes of like topics I want to come back to. We did do an episode on anger, a one-on-one episode with me and Joanna Horton McPherson. Gosh, at the beginning of 2025, I want to say, could have been the very end of 2024. And I do think anger is just such an important concept in the scope of this conversation. I think that especially honestly, for all gender identities in patriarchy, because everybody's carrying rage under patriarchy, right? And I think speaking of the US, like this really speaks a lot to the violence that happens and like the mass violence that happens, which of course is predominantly committed by men, but men are young men, right? Young men are carrying rage. Everybody's carrying rage in this. And so like, how is that productive or helpful? And I think that this relates back to entrepreneurship so much because I think that the autonomy of ownership over, well, anything, but especially having ownership over your business, your livelihood, and the way that you make decisions. There's so many decisions that are out of your hands when you're working for someone else. And so I think that the autonomy of entrepreneurship helps release a lot of that rage. Now, of course, like you're talking, I mean, I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast before, and I think we will do another episode specifically about rage because I think that's important. But I think for me, to your point, in 2016, I was going through a really horrible healing from a really horrible breakup at the same time as like a very contentious election in the United States, a very hateful, rage-inducing election. And I think that, of course, we've seen that just escalate since then. But that definitely, I remember thinking in 2016, I didn't know I had this rage inside of me. And I know that that's very privileged to not know. And so I also acknowledge like there are other people, especially like Black women, who carried more of that rage just from existing that I didn't even know I had until 2016. And I think a lot of that is because the patriarchy and white supremacy, et cetera, like really makes you feel like, especially as a woman, that you can't have anger and that you can't express anger. And to your point, Siobhan, about like it's unlikable to be aggressive. And Susanna, you said this about like trying to put women in kind of male leadership roles. It's considered unlikable for a woman to tap into that anger and aggression. So we're not supposed to be angry. And in fact, I've had men literally argue with me that women were happier in like the 50s, that their happiness levels were higher. And it's like, do you think that because women didn't report being unhappy because you realize they like couldn't, right? Like
taking little happy pills.
You literally couldn't own property. You weren't guaranteed for a right to work. You couldn't have a bank account in your own name, let alone take out a line of credit in your own name. So then you have no choice. Let's be clear. Women were not happier in the 50s. They just didn't have the right to be unhappy. Now we have enough rights that you have to hear about it. That's the difference, right? And so I think like tapping into, I do have a side of me that has rage. And I think truly, if you're not angry at this point in 2025, if you are not angry, you are not paying attention.
I absolutely agree. If you're not angry, you're not paying attention. I think being an empathetic business owner requires a constant level of simmering rage, because it's the simmering rage that causes you to make those sometimes more difficult decisions, right? The decisions that we're talking about, that we're doing things differently and we are modeling behavior as business owners of how we want to do things. A lot of times those decisions are the more difficult path. And so it's that rage that pushes us onto the more difficult path because we know that it's the right thing to do to model that behavior. I do want to mention before I forget, one of my clients who is a therapist and a wellness coach, she helps primarily women of the global majority, women of color, and she's been doing virtual rage rooms that are incredibly successful. I feel like I want to send it to you, Sarah, because maybe we should put it in the show notes or something, because people need a place to process these feelings that you're right. Like for many, many years, we have been told, don't feel that. Maybe it was just me and my upbringing. I'm a person who feels big feelings, all of them. And the amount of times that I was told that I was over dramatic, too sensitive, beating a dead horse, all of when it was just me experiencing the full breadth of human emotion, but like not those emotions. You can experience the full human emotions, but only the happy ones, only the good ones. The bad ones, like you just need to just lock those down, right? So it does feel like this new frontier of, okay, actually, it's really healthy to feel those feelings. And so, how do we walk through a sexist world where we're not really supposed to feel those things? Like you said about the 50s, like, unfortunately, what men are secretly saying is they just liked it better when women kept quiet. They're like, it was happier then. Oh, women were just quieter. They didn't talk about what they wanted or what they needed or what was unjust. And
What's
it's
interesting,
uncomfortable for them.
I saw a Threads post. By the way, social media is such a minefield right now, but I found my happy people on Threads. It's like this group, okay? Plus,
Yeah.
there's like some witchy people and some outdoorsy people, and it's just fun. And one of the comments was they want us to go back to the 50s. Do you know how many men used to mysteriously die of poisoning in the 50s and 60s? Because women didn't have rights. And when the no fault divorce laws were passed, the death rate of men mysteriously went down. Yeah.
Well, I saw a Threads post recently that said, like, my true moment of radicalization was Goodbye Earl by the Dixie Chicks. Now known as Chicks.
Love that, man.
Accurate, actually. I remember listening to that song in the back seat of my neighbor's mom's minivan on the
Yep.
way to school. And I was like, what is this? And why do I like it so much? I'm 11.
Because you were tapped into your deeper ancestral knowing, is what it
We
was.
knew.
Yeah.
Did any of you read the book The Awakening in school or by choice? It's Kate Chopin, I think.
It sounds vaguely familiar.
Okay, so
read
I
so
had
many
to read
books
it in 11th grade, which admittedly was a very fucking long time ago. You blink and you're like, oh, it's been an even longer time ago than I realized, but that's okay. That's good. I love getting older. I would love to reread this book. It's been on my list for a little while of wanting to reread it because I thought it was okay. I like classic literature, so let me go ahead and just put that out there. I enjoy books that are challenging to me. And so, even as a teenager, the books that were like assigned in school, I liked that they were a little bit hard if they were written like a long time ago, if that makes sense, because it forced me to like kind of use my brain. I'm a big reader though. I love to read. I think the premise of this book, from the best of my memory, is that a woman is in a very unhappy marriage. She falls in love outside of her marriage, but it is not feasible for her to actually have that love in her life. So she ends up walking into the ocean at the end. And this book blew my mind as a teenager. And let me look up real quick when this was written because that matters.
1899.
Okay. Yes.
I Googled it because I've not heard of it.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. 1899 for context. And so this book has lived rent free in my head since then because I have, speaking of like a core knowing, right? I have a core knowing in my being that I had even then, the 16-year-old reading this book, or 17, whatever I was, that I understand why women who don't have autonomy and don't have choices take the only autonomy they have to walk into the ocean at the end. And I a little bit think entrepreneurship is that, right? I think that it's the walking into the ocean of corporate capitalist dreams. So I'm a person who, like, my whole life dreamed of being a CEO, corner office, etc. Dreamed of it. I very briefly, I've shared this a little bit on the podcast before. I very briefly worked at a summer camp during college. Loved camp as a kid, by the way. Very briefly worked at a summer camp in college. And during staff training, they said to us, this job's going to be really hard. You're going to be exhausted, blah, blah. But anytime this job feels hard, I want you to remember you could be spending this summer in an office. And when I told my best friends that instead of getting another job after a layoff, I was going to pursue entrepreneurship, that I kind of now saw being like just a cog in the wheel of the corporate capitalist machine is essentially like just continuing to be part of the problem. And I don't want to be part of it. What's the Game of Thrones quote? I don't want to be part of the wheel. I want to break the wheel. Like, no, I want to escape that, right? I want to help overthrow that. I want to change it. I want to do business better. And the best opportunity I have to do that is to try to start my own thing. My best friends who had always known me for a decade plus as somebody who dreamed of being a CEO, they literally were like, this is a trauma response. And are you going to therapy? And I was like, no, you're missing the point. Like, you're not hearing me. I'm lit up. I'm fired up. This is me taking back my power and like taking back my autonomy. And I feel like this through empowerment over having autonomy over what I do, how I spend my day, what clients I work with, how I make decisions, who's on my team, how I manage that team, how do we like meet deadlines? How does my family keep a roof over their heads? Like, this feels like empowerment to me. And I don't know. I don't know what the like through line is there, but that's just the freight train of my brain, like processing these concepts.
I think there's a lot of power also in allowing the dream to change. I've had that experience many times in my life. I was going to be an actress. Okay, guys, I have a theater degree and a mass media journalism degree. And I was like, I'm going to make films and I'm going to go to New York and be on Broadway. And
I love that.
Yeah, it was super fun. And I still love theater. And I did end up living in New York City for a decade, but not doing that. And there was this moment of realization for me that I didn't want to do that anymore. And I had to come to terms and decide for myself how I was going to feel about that and what stories I was going to tell myself about that. I could either tell myself that I had failed and that it was because I didn't want that dream enough or whatever it might be, or I could say that I had changed and I still loved a lot of the things that I loved, but I wanted to do those things I loved in a different way because of what that meant for my life and my livelihood. And that's how I ended up in marketing, because I was like, it's still creative and I'm still telling stories but I have benefits and I don't have to worry about hustling for the next show or the next job or whatever. And then the dream changed again when I was like, I don't want to be a CMO in corporate. I want to own my own business, which was never a dream for me ever.
So at the risk of throwing in another 90s quote, you had to pivot.
I have that magnet on my fridge.
Friends with the couch.
The couch, yes.
It's
Pivot. That's actually why I bought the magnet from that scene, was to remind myself that like, you're just in life, you're always pivoting. But it's not so much to talk about life story, but I really think, Sarah, and I hadn't really thought about it this way, that you're right. Like, not only making the decision, deciding how you feel about and how you're going to think about these decisions that we make about ourselves, like that is power. And that is autonomy, to not let anybody else tell you that it's a trauma response. You need to go to therapy, to not let anybody else tell you like, oh, well, you didn't have what it took, so you quit. No, I made a choice. And that's taking back our power too.
The power of knowing when to pivot is so important. And it's so hard for women because we are so perfectionist driven and we don't want to quit, right? And sometimes you need to know when things have run their course. There is a season for every part of your life. And you have to know that when the seasons change. And I find it hard, like, to know when that is. I end up either fighting longer, staying longer than I should, being afraid to make the jump or the pivot. So like trying to learn how to read those signs in my own life better for both personal and business is something I'm currently working on. So any advice from you guys on how to do that, I would love it.
Quiet the noise. One of the biggest reasons it's hard to know those things for ourselves is because other people's opinions on when it's time to pivot, if you should keep fighting, or if you, all of that you just mentioned, they're so loud that it's hard to hear your own intuition and your own gut about those things. And so I think that's the first step, is being like, I know you have opinions, but those are not for me right now.
It also doesn't help that me and my multiple personalities in my head are trying to come to a decision together. It's like, all right, it's already too much in here. I don't need the outside opinions either.
But those multiple personalities were formed by the communities that you've lived in. The voices, they're not just yours, they are other people's voices. And I think that intuition, that knowing, that's come up a couple of times in different contexts in this conversation, which is really interesting and very opposite of patriarchy. Because I think the patriarchy really tries to like violently beat the intuition out of you and to teach you not to trust yourself so that you have to participate in patriarchy, right? And we all, including men, this is not just for women, this is all genders, like we all have to shed our trust of our intuition in order to participate in patriarchy, and actually tapping back into that intuition, understanding what is intuition, what is my intuition, is hard when you've spent your whole life being a perfectionist people pleaser of like excellence is the only option. So if what you're teaching me from the time I'm a toddler, society is teaching me from the time you're an infant, is that I have to forego my intuition, I have to shut down my intuition, I can't listen to my intuition, then you have all of those years of unlearning to do. And you were so good at learning that lesson. You were so good at it. And you pride yourself on being such a good learner, such a quick learner, such a quick study, such an excellent student. I'm an excellent student. So I learned really well how to shed my intuition. Now I have to go back and like relearn that. That's hard. And that's where I was mentioning too, like sometimes when where's the poop, right? Like sometimes when something sounds really good and it's like, I can't figure out some people, it's easy to say, I don't trust that person. But some people it's like, or their advice, not the person, but like, I don't trust that person's advice. But other people, it's like, I can't tell if I trust your advice or not. Like, I can't tell if that's good advice. So I think like, yeah, trying to relearn how to listen to yourself is like, it's so hard, but that is, I think, the key.
I heard a good quote the other day, and it was, don't take advice from anyone whose life you wouldn't want to have. Like, if you don't want to be like them, don't feel compelled to take their advice. And I was like, okay, I'm going to sit with that for a minute.
Yeah. I have had to take that advice about my parents. My mom is my best friend. And in some ways we're extremely similar. In some ways we're extremely different, but I know her better than anyone. And I know what her trauma and her stories and like, there are a lot of things about that I don't want to carry forward. Like, hang on. Yeah, that's a really, I agree with you. That's a really compelling piece of advice.
While you were talking, Sarah, I kept thinking about some of the phrases that we've heard our whole lives that short circuit our trust of our intuition. One of them being like, well, women make decisions with their emotions and men make decisions with like their logic, which is like, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's said in a way that it's like, well, that's bad.
Men are way more emotional.
Absolutely, they are.
Oh my God.
Absolutely.
I think being emotional is part of what makes humans capable of what we're capable of. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think actually, this kind of comes back to rage, right? Like the problem isn't the anger. It's what we do with that anger. It's how we process that anger. And so I think that what makes humans capable of having experienced the evolution that we have in the course of human history, the innovation that we have, is the fact that we're both emotional and logical. And I think that both things can be true. Both things can matter. But yeah, what if when someone said to you, can you just be rational about this? Can you just be logical about this? What if we could respond and be like, can you just care? What if you just care?
That's so true. Like at the moment as well, with like everything that's going on in the world, like the people who are not angry just don't care about anybody but themselves. And it's been really fascinating to watch from across the pond as like we've had like 18 months of one genocide, let alone like all the other genocides going on in the world. Yet the thing that's like pushed quite a lot of American women to like get angry is the fact that their rights are being taken away. Like they couldn't give a shit about like any brown kids being bombed, starved to death, mothers weeping for their children, dads crying, journalists being annihilated, hospitals being bombed. They couldn't give a crap about any of that. But the moment their rights are potentially going, or they're seeing their neighbours being taken away by ICE, they're like, oh my God. Like, where was your rage before? Like, I'm glad you're on the trail now. That's great. Super happy for you to join us on the rage train. But like, where have you been? Where have you fucking been? Like, I know but in the UK, there was like a decision about basically trans women not being recognised as women, like a really key decision by the Supreme Court. So J.K. Rowling is like, woo, put loads of money into this campaign and it's great and I'm super happy about it. Woo, me and my turfy friends, and toasting champagne outside the courts and all that. Yet trans folk are now potentially not going to be recognised, and the intersex people, nobody's even acknowledging that they exist. Trans men, they're not even like, no one's even mentioned them. It's just like trans women are a threat. But yeah, I think it's really interesting just watching things happening, and like it's really the awakening. That title of that book, like it feels like there's an awakening happening at the moment, and I just find it really, really fascinating because I've been on the rage train literally my entire life. And my nickname at uni was Angry Sean. Like, I just would get angry about like actual things that matter, not just road rage, that too, but like, and crap drivers, but like actual things that matter, like the safety of my trans friends or like gay marriage. Those things would really rile me up. I'm just like, where have the rest of you been? Is it because I'm an empath? Is it an ADHD superpower? Is it childhood trauma? I don't know, but I can't let things go. My mum describes me as dogmatic. Like I can't let things go, but I don't understand why other people can't. Like, I know that's probably something that's wrong with me, but
no, it's righteous indignation, righteous rage, because you're afraid about, you're angry about things that, impact real people's lives. That's a thing. And you're right. Like, I do go the same, like, thank you so much for finally waking up, but also, where have you been? Like, are you new here? When people are like, oh my gosh, can you believe what is happening? And I'm like, it's done been happening, ma'am.
Yeah, I can believe it because humanity's been doing it since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
Like, how have we been here however many thousands and thousands of years and we cannot get this shit straight? Like, we make the same mistakes in history over and over again.
But I think that's a really valid question then, and we do not have time to dig into it, but that is a really valid question then, as far as building empathy for why people don't get it, is because then when you interrogate that, like, actually, because systemically it's the world has been structured, their education has been structured, the way stories have been told to them have been structured in a way, and to all of us, right, in a way to protect us from knowing things that would make us righteously indignant. Because if we knew, we wouldn't stand for it. So that's why, like, and again, I can speak specifically to the United States because that's where I am, but like, that's why the current administration and cronies across the country want their hands in education. They want to dismantle the Department of Education. They want to control what does and doesn't happen in our classrooms. They want to make it Christian based. And and this is kind of interesting too, because not that Christianity has to look like this, but this brand of Christianity, any religious fundamentalism, right, is going to be based on control. And I think if they can control the narrative and how people are being taught about things, and if they can encourage apathy, the reason why voting isn't compulsory in the United States is they don't want people to vote. They actually want fewer people to vote. They actually want to suppress voting. They want fewer polling locations. They want less people to have access to vote. They want to put in new stipulations for people's IDs so that they don't have access to voting. So they actually want you to be apathetic. If it's hard, maybe you won't do it. And then they can just continue to control what they want to control and get richer. And so I think then that actually does breed, I think, empathy to the reason you don't get it and the reason you haven't gotten it until now when it's on your doorstep or your next door neighbor's doorstep is because you've been socialized not to get it. And if you want to have your own awakening, You totally fucking can. You totally can. It is not too late. Some days it feels like it's too late, but it is not too late and we can still save the planet. Like, it is not too late. Let's do it. Like, let's do it. And if you want to be here with me and you want to learn, like, you can sit with me, right? Like, and I think that's one of the things that I love about this podcast, to kind of bring it all full circle, to kind of wrap it up, because I could talk to you all day. This has been so fun. I like looked at the clock and I was like, how has it been an hour? But I feel like that's what I love about Big Brave Business. When I put these questions out there and I invited people, either my friends, my network connections, or people who had applied to be a guest from like Threads or social media or whatever, or having listened to the podcast. Which, by the way, if you listen to this podcast and you haven't applied to be a guest, you totally can, bigbravebusiness.com. But when I invited people on to season 3 and I was like, here's the topics, it's like a big question. What I heard from some people is, I don't feel qualified to talk about any of, like, some of these topics are interesting, but I don't feel qualified. And so I tried to stress to people, like, you don't have to be qualified. You just have to be interested. Because if you're willing to show up and participate, then you're going to learn stuff. You're going to hear from people who, and asking the questions is learning. Like, that's why we're here and that's what we're doing here. And I think most of us don't have the answers, but coming together like this and pooling our resources, that's how we all collectively do better. And that's what I think has been so beautiful about season 3, is like, this format really lends itself so well to that sense of community, and like, we don't have to do this alone, and how much better we can all be, how much bigger and braver we can all be by doing this together. So anyways, thank you so much for being here. If you want to connect with the beautiful people on this call, of course you can, because our bios and our links are all in the description of the episode or the show notes, and I hope you will connect with them. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you so much. And this was such a like big and brave conversation. And thank you for meeting me here in this space today, and for kicking off my Big Brave Wednesday of back-to-back podcast episodes. This has been a really good start for me. And I know, depending on where you are, it's the end of the day. So, but for you listening, thank you for being here with us as well, and for sticking through this like hour of an intense conversation. And I hope that we will see you right back here for another one next week. Okay, don't forget to connect with everybody in the show notes. Okay, bye.